Every once in a while, an episode comes along that transcends a fandom. Its direction, its animation are something so special, it goes beyond the show's community and becomes something of an industry event. It's not just a few well-animated scenes, it's an unrelenting powerhouse. Top staff from all around the world all comment on it, and it sort of unofficially goes into this bank of legendary episodes that'll never be forgotten. More recently, there was Fate Apocrypha's episode 22, a Sakuga showdown featuring some of the finest webgen animators around. It caused a real storm, and in fact it shares one thing in common with today's topic, that is, connections. With landmark episodes, it often brings about the old budget meme, the anime fandom's unfortunate obsession with money, despite One Punch Man character designers' assertions that it's all about who you know and not how much you have. You still see reactions like, well, they must have spent all the budget on this episode. Apocrypha 22's success comes from its animation director Hakuyu Go bringing in his top-tier animator friends. Connections are essential, and this is also the key to Boruto's own landmark episode that we're covering today. The catalyst of this feast, its director, its storyboard artist, its animation director is Chunxi Huang, a Chinese animator with extensive ties to the franchise. His history, his build-up to this defining moment is fascinating, and I really want to take the time to highlight it. As a child in China, it was Dragon Ball Z that first turned him onto the idea of animation, and in fact, one of the people who introduced him into the industry was Chu Yong-se, who actually went on to become a fan favourite on Dragon Ball Super. After a few instances of second key animation on Shippuden, he caught the eye of Hiroyuki Yamashita, a huge name on the franchise responsible for some of the series' most memorable moments. He was quickly brought into the staff properly and really made a name for himself in episode 465, where he took his personal passion for Wing Chun and turned it into a pretty impressive display of heavily choreographed animation. From there, he became a regular key animator and featured all over the series' most iconic moments, channeling his mentor Yamashita to the point of confusing fans over who was who. As Yamashita moved up the food chain, becoming a series director for Boruto, Huang set out to make his own progress, directing his own episode, and that brings us to this phenomenal event. As I said, connections are key, and a quick look at the staff list will show some pretty unconventional names, ones that I'm kind of dreading having to pronounce. One of the key contacts Huang made was Indonesian web animator Guzu, who was working on the Chinese anime To Be Heroine. He recommended several of his co-workers, the likes of Gem, Till, Hero, David Bradshaw, Kilo Crescent, and so many other remarkably talented web animators. He also managed to rope in Western sensation Spencer Wan, who many will know for the Netflix Castlevania series. Alongside many regular Japanese animators, this is a real international phenomenon. I can't think of many other examples that mix generations, nationalities, and styles. It really shows the power and importance of social media. With that fairly lengthy, though essential background out of the way, I think it's time we dove in and looked at the intricacies that make this so special. Prior to the OP, things kick off with a cold opening animated by Huang himself. He put in over 500 hours during the last month to get this episode done on time, and considering there are only 730 hours in a month, that should give you an idea of just how absurd that is. His approach in this opening scene says a lot about his influences and dedication to Naruto as a franchise. Using very specific mouth movement during dialogue is a rarity in anime, but it was coined by Toshiyuki Suru during Naruto, adopted by Hiroyuki Yamashita, and then passed down to Huang as we see in this episode. Since it's so rare, it stands out against regular dialogue, and as a result has become a common way of emphasizing the emotional weight of a scene. It's an eye-catching way to kick things off and 100% boost the impact of Momoshiki's speech. Following the OP, the episode kicks off properly with Kana Ito of Studio Wit fame animating Naruto and Sasuke lunging at Momoshiki. You can really get a sense of Huang's direction here, with a real emphasis on scale and long-form camera movement as the pair fall through the tree trunks. This is very much emphasized in the next scene, where Hirofumi Masuda animates the ever-so-famous Itano Circus as Momoshiki dodges Gaara's sand. There's this focus on readability with how each shot flows into the next. It's complex movement and camera work, but it is never confusing. For example, you get a sense of where everyone is in the world between transitions. There's a low-angle shot of Chojuro and Kurochichi to establish where they are at the end of the scene before Momoshiki comes through the smoke in the next cut. I mentioned Huang's experience with Wing Chun earlier, and this is injected into his storyboard in a big way. Hut Over Maverick scene is the first example of this in this episode, with that heavily choreographed feel as Momoshiki counters the attack. As Naruto jumps back into action, the approach is brought right back into focus with a lengthy martial arts inspired scene from the likes of Shujuan. This complex hand-to-hand combat is a real sight to behold, and of course there's a homage to Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch to really hammer home Hwang's inspirations. I absolutely love the debris work as he smashed into the tree trunk. I've seen this described akin to a shotgun blast, and I absolutely agree. The attack pierces right through Naruto before impacting on the environment. It is absurdly effective. This tree explosion actually marks the start of American animator Gem's section, and stylistically things change up quite a bit. Gem is heavily inspired by animator legend Yutaka Nakamura, and that's plain to see in her debris work where she's opted for Utapon's ever so famous cubes. This is very much an episode of youngsters channeling their idols while simultaneously showing the world they're their own person. This next scene is one of the most breathtaking sections within this episode and has rightfully been passed around the fandom in genuine awe. Weilin Zhang, credited here as Golgate, is just unbelievable. It is such a shame broadcasting rules led to some of the high motion sections being ghosted, but what you can see is phenomenal. You've got absolutely delicious smears, cool, complex martial arts, Yamashita-esque Sharingan eye trails, Sasuke catching a sword with his foot and launching it at Momoshiki, showcasing Hwang's incredible action boarding once again. I cannot emphasize just how nice it is to see interesting choreography backed up by highly idiosyncratic motion. It somehow manages to get even better in the next scene where the camera is pulled back, and we get to see these characters convincingly dance around in 3D space. You very often see complex action animated on a single plane, so to board it in such a manner and have it executed so well is really just a sight to behold. Till Finning wraps up this momentous scene with some absurdly complicated background animation that once again showcases Hwang's real desire to convey depth in single cuts through the board. Guzu comes up next, unfortunately having his work ruined by ghosting, but again, I feel like it's Hwang's knack for storyboarding that carries this scene so well. In fact, Hwang actually storyboarded this section with Guzu's animation in mind, directly referencing one of his old personal animations from earlier this year. The flow of action is just so clean, particularly where Sasuke swaps himself with Momoshiki before Naruto sends him flying, marking the start of Kilo Crescent's cuts. The sheer scale of this spectacle is just nuts. The background animation has such lovely line work. I mentioned Hwang's admiration of his idols, and as such, it's not really too surprising to see a tribute to Shippuden's own landmark episode, Atsushi Wakabayashi's 167. Although this episode does have several animation supervisors around to ensure these phenomenal animators aren't so unrestrained as to distract more casual viewers like parts of 167, they certainly couldn't resist throwing in their own little nod to that amazing episode. In fact, this episode contains the vast majority of the series' regular animation directors, including the series' character designer Tetsuya Nishio. He doesn't typically find himself outside of movies or openings, so his presence here is a pretty neat treat for fans. In fact, at 22 cuts, this is the most he's ever animated for the TV anime. Skipping ahead a little, he primarily handles the dialogue between Naruto and Sasuke at the end of the episode, demonstrating a knack for character acting. In contrast to his fellow supervisors, his style feels a lot softer and carefully refined, which is probably a good thing considering his position. Back on track, following the little 167 reference, we get some terrifically detailed eye porn as Momoshiki launches himself into the camera. This came from relatively unknown animator Hiromatsu Shu and feeds seamlessly into David Bradshaw's scene as he hits the ground and several funky dragon snakes erupt from the floor, leading to the bulk of Bradshaw's work as Sasuke kicks Naruto out of the way and flips around to avoid the attacks. Dog shows up for a very short effects-driven scene that feeds into Legend Optical Core's spectacular Utapon-inspired explosion. It is so cool to see square shapes billow up inside the smoke. The next section largely repurposes Attack on Titan idol Arifumi Imai's kaiju sequences from the movie, though there are a few little additions here and there from Ren Onodera. When we return back to things properly, a slick little transition leads into Spencer One's scene. One is, of course, a bit of a Western superstar. His Castlevania work was a hot topic around its release, and he is very much in tune with the Sakuga fandom as a whole. He animates the vanishing Rasengan throw that not only has great timing and terrific smears, but also goes uncorrected, showcasing a more manga-centric Boruto. I absolutely adore the flowing fabric and bouncy motion. There's a real youthfulness to the movement. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, Hwang animates the terrific impact, bringing about the perfect reference to my favourite animator of all time, Shingo Yamashita. Though not exactly noteworthy as far as movement goes, at least relative to the rest of this episode, I'd be remiss not to mention the emotional weight Hwang's board carries as we're shown Boruto's Rasengan building. It really hammers home the generational themes of this episode and serves as one hell of a build-up to the final throw. Prior to that though, Muggle and Hiro joined forces to beef up some reused scenes from the movie as Boruto's clone and Sasuke attack Momoshiki. I'm a huge fan of Hiro's cut in particular. I really adore the effortlessness conveyed in the counter, and of course the section before where Boruto comes flying in like a smeary bullet is a great nod to Norio Matsumoto's original Naruto vs Sasuke. Interestingly, what follows is an almost melancholic cutaway, a sort of calm before the storm. It's a radical departure from the breakneck speed of the rest of the episode, and if this is indeed Hwang's doing and not that of his assistant Takeru Ogiwara, then it really showcases his versatility as a director. The compositions are gorgeous, the lighting choices and low contrast red hues are remarkably effective too. Retsu Okawara brings it to life very convincingly, the effects-driven disintegration is just lovely. With the calm over, the storm hits as we snap back to Naoki Kobayashi's reused tree explosion from the movie. Its debris work is phenomenal, it fits seamlessly and rounds things off in the best way. That marks the end of this action spectacle though, and all that's left is for character designer Tetsuya Nishio's delicate character acting that I mentioned earlier to succinctly close the episode. He really is the perfect person to draw the curtain on this momentous episode. The production team knew this was going to be something special, and they weren't afraid to give Hwang as many resources as possible to ensure his vision could be brought to life unrestrained. His mentor, Hiroyuki Yamashita, also provided uncredited assistance with supervising the action. This was a superstar event in so many ways. For an episode whose themes are all about generations and passing the torch, the behind the scenes could not reflect that any clearer. This is the result of mentorship, the result of a gathering of generations from all around the world. It's about new voices and celebrating freedom of expression. This is the ideal anime episode, and everyone's countless hours more than paid off. Whether you like the series, hate the series, or have no opinion on its content whatsoever, it's undeniable that this is a landmark event. It's an episode of the year contender, and I say that as someone who hasn't paid attention to Naruto since the Pain fight. This is something special, and it's great to see communities beyond its fanbase sit up and pay close attention. I'm very excited to see how these young talents will evolve over the coming years. This was one hell of a way to make a mark on the industry. Thank you so much for listening. This was one of the hardest videos I have ever had to make. My expertise is on toy animation, as my viewers know, so jumping into new territory was incredibly challenging and very scary. I couldn't have done it alone, so I want to take the time to say thank you to a few people before we wrap things up. Firstly, Jem, an animator on this episode, was so gracious in providing me with extensive knowledge of this production. She answered all of my questions without hesitation and was just a pleasure to work with. Purple Geth and Siki of the Naruto Sakuga Reddit, their work has been absurdly informative, and they very kindly supervised this script as I was writing it. Kevin of Sakuga Blog was a huge help in providing background information on many of these unknown animators, and of course there are a whole bunch of helpful resources from others that I'll leave in the description too. This was a whole bunch of work, so if you enjoyed it, please be sure to rate the video. If this was your thing and you would love to see more like it, then be sure to subscribe, but for now, I will see you next time.